Hello there, this is Mark Malecki. I am going to be giving a talk today on the subject of materials for use of painting with color in Sumi-E. A lot of people have asked me to explain the pros and the cons of materials relating to color in Sumi-E. Just a slight background. Sumi-E means ink painting. So a Sumi-E painting is going to be an ink painting, but quite a while ago, they began to also use color in Sumi-E, and so in the Japanese language, a painting that is partially Sumi-E, partially ink, and partially color is called Sui Bokuga. In America, we call both styles, use of color or not, Sumi-E. But you still should know that is a slight distinction about it. Nevertheless, color is very popular in Sumi-E here in America, and so a lot of students want to try it. And the first question is, well, what kind of sets should I buy? What's out there? And it's kind of confusing, so what should I buy or get? So let's stick with the kind of the basics. The first thing you can get is something called Chinese watercolor. And Chinese watercolor is found with a brand called Marie's. Marie's is this one has a tan box. Marie's also makes regular watercolors, but make sure you're getting the Marie's that are called Chinese painting color. They come in several sizes. They come in a small sample size, and they also come in a bigger size with bigger tubes as well. I'm looking for it now, but I'll show it to you when it comes up. Okay, and the Marie's paints come with the important colors in them. They have the Chinese description of them on the tube, but in addition, the sets do have an explanation using the Roman alphabet for what the colors are that comes in the box. The advantage to the Marie's colors is that they are inexpensive, and the quality of the paint itself I find is rather good. Chinese colors, Chinese watercolors are a little thicker than Western watercolor pigments are. There's a little bit more glue in them, and they are designed for use with our Sumi-E papers. And so they give you a very reasonable cost for your basic colors, and it's a good place to start. They come in various sizes. There's a collection even of 30 different colors in one set. The basic sets might have as few as 12 or 24 colors, but for your purposes, that's quite enough. The slight downsides to Marie's are that the tubes are sometimes a little bit prone to leak. So there have been occasions where I have squeezed onto the tube and the backside will open up. And I have not run into that in Western watercolors. So to some extent, the tubes are a little bit unreliable, especially in some of the older sets. They are switching over to plastic tubes that do not have quite that problem. Sometimes the old tubes also leaked a little bit and the paint would harden within, but you could still use them by cutting that tube open and just putting that onto a palette and adding water to it, and then you could still paint with it. Yasutomo, which is a Japanese company, does sell another set of paints that are called Chinese watercolors, and the Yasutomo set is also reasonably priced and in plastic tubes. I don't happen to have it with me, but you can look that up onto various websites. So those are the two choices for the Chinese watercolor. The strong points being that they are very reasonably priced. The weaker point being that they sometimes have in the past had problems with tubes that would open up. I am assuming that they're addressing that. The other thing that is a little bit inconvenient about them is that they are usually not open stock. There might be one or two merchants that sell Marie's colors open stock. You'd have to investigate that, but the sets are usually so reasonably priced that it almost pays to just go ahead and order the whole set again. So that is the drawback to these Chinese paints, either the Marie's or the Yasutomo. The other option that you have is Japanese pan paints. And I'm going to give you some Japanese words. The Japanese word for these pan paints is called gansai, and gansai means in Japanese face paint. So I'm assuming that in the past actors would use these use similar colors to do makeup with, but in any event it got turned into an art term. So gansai looks like this. Now there are two companies that make gansai and market it. One is called Kisho, Kissho, and that's this company with these distinctive kanji, and the sets look like this. The sets come in as few as 12 and as much as 60. The gansai is also sold by another company called Kuretake, and Kuretake makes a gansai set as well. They're both priced equivalent to each other, and you will be able to find them through internet searches. I don't sell them, but if you type in gansai, sets will come up. They're sometimes used now even in Western art. Gansai will be in these plastic pans. Now, what are the upsides and downsides to the plastic pans? The plastic pans give you the ability to paint immediately. Other than spritzing with a little bit of spray as you start, you don't have to worry about squeezing out paint in tubes and misjudging how much paint you need. So it's faster. The slight downside is when we are painting with Sumi-E brushes, we oftentimes are mixing colors together, and it is possible to get some of your color into other colors. So when that happens, you do have to take care to clean off the colors. So if I'm painting with blue and then I somehow have to get a little yellow in, I might be putting some blue on my yellow. I will just wipe that off later. The pigment is quite strong. This is made in Japan. They are more expensive by a factor of 3 to the Chinese paints. On the other hand, a set will last a very long time. The pigments are very intense, and so if you have more money to invest, it might be good to get these. There is a version of these in tube form as well, and they look like this. These tubes are sold in Japan, and you may be able to find them in America through Amazon Japan or through buying service to Japan. And these are the same colors that are in this set. these sets. I'm going to explain what colors you should have later in this lesson. What size set you should get to start with. But for now, I'm wanting to lay out what you can order. All right, the pluses to these sets are that they are very strong, that you're ready to paint right away. The minus is you occasionally get some cross-contamination, which you have to clean. The other thing is, if you're carrying them around, it's easy for them to spill, so you have to make sure you tape the box down, because that would be a problem. Color chart is available as well in most of these sets, so these are very nice sets. I have preferred the Kisho, but the Kuretake, some of my students have it, and it looks very nice. So that one could be good too. I think it might be slightly less expensive than the Kisho, but they're both all right. Now, as far as the important question of open stock, you have to always worry about your sets, because what'll happen is you're going to run out of certain colors faster than others. When you have art supplies that don't have open stock replacement, it can end up being more expensive in the long run, because you've got to buy a whole new set. And there's going to be some colors that you never use. That's a big waste. Fortunately, I have found one or two sites where they have open stock Gansai, if anyone wants me to tell them, send that information as far as what sites have it. The one I found, I think, is called St. Louis Art Supply. But the reason I don't use it is I go to Japan. So in Japanese stores, they have these open stock very easily. If you go to Japan, all of these things are on sale in the art supply stores because they have things like that. Now, related to this Gansai is pigments that are put in porcelain containers. And this is also a product by Kiso. And Kiso will put some of these same colors in large pans. In America, a set of 12 of these is available from Yasutomo, and there's a set of 12 colors that are all pretty much the basic colors. You can get all of the colors that are in this smaller set in this set if you go to Japan, or you might be able to order these if by getting the name of the color. And there is sometimes Japanese art buying services that will give you the colors that match that. Now, I would say that this much paint actually lasts you for quite a while. I think one of the things about these paints is that they are very strong. So buying one of them might last you 4 or 5 years. So these are called Tampitsu because at one time, instead of porcelain, they were in iron containers, but now they are in porcelain. So these sets are available. I think they run in the range of $120, about $10 per pan. But again, you're buying something that's going to last you for several years, even if you do a lot of painting. There's no real downside to them, but I will warn you all about the fact that all of the paints that we are getting from Japan and China are not necessarily tested for light fastness. be very cautious of all of the deep reds and purples in your sets. I'm not saying you shouldn't paint with them. Don't put your painting in a sunny window if you're looking to preserve some of those bright purples, however. Be a little bit cautious that light fastness is not a strong feature of any of these paints. Other of the pigments are very light fast and not really much of a problem. Okay, the next question I sometimes get is, can I use my Western watercolors? Maybe somebody's got a nice set of Winsor Newton or Grumbacher or one of those sets, and they want to know whether or not they can use them in Sumi-E. The answer to that is yes. If you don't have money in your budget right now for the Chinese set or the Japanese set, you can use Western watercolor. One of the reasons that we still eventually might want to get the others is that the Chinese and the Japanese sets are designed directly for Sumi-E. So there's somewhat more glue in the paints, and they are somewhat more opaque, just a little bit. The Western watercolors are somewhat more transparent. In the past, some people have considered that when you re-wet the painting for mounting, that the watercolors are going to run. But in fact, the testing I've done shows that they do stay put fairly well. So if you have Western watercolors, consider using them. And you don't, but if you have money in the budget, try the Japanese or the Chinese sets as well. A recent thing that I've started to do is to use gouache. Gouache is opaque watercolors, and there are very nice sets of them. And if you are using gouache for Sumi-E, you have to dilute them with water, because gouache is a form of watercolor, but it's very thick and it is somewhat opaque. So I use gouache directly when I'm doing a painting that is a Nihonga painting where I want an opaque color effect. But for Sumi-E, I could take these gouache and add water to them to get a Sumi-E effect. And in fact, it might be somewhat closer to these Japanese and Chinese colors than, say, a regular watercolor would be. A gouache set that I couldn't resist getting is put out by Holbein, and this one is called Irodori. They have a set of 48 all total, but the first set that I wanted to get is the set of 12 in the summer colors. But Holbein also makes a number of other colors. They come in tubes of this size. You can dilute them and use them for Sumi-E. And so that is an option. But gouache is as expensive as the Japanese colors are. So maybe you can try a starter set that comes with the smaller tubes and see if you like to paint with the gouache. Let's talk a little bit about Chinese chips. Now, you might see this in some places. Chinese chips are another form of color, and they sell them in boxes. They sell them in little boxes about like this size. You can get them from these from your art dealers that deal in Chinese paints, and they will come in a little bit of a baggie like this. And then what you do is you take a empty, or in this case I'm using the same color again. when I want to paint, I will just open this up and I put 5, 6, or 7 of these into this. I add water and I stir. And that makes a nice paint, and I can use it directly. In addition, we use a lot of yellow in landscapes, so they make a rattan yellow that looks like this. The pluses to the chips are that they stay dry until you need them. And that's kind of nice. You never have to worry about them drying in the tube. There's something kind of instant and refreshing about that. The downside to these is that you do have to dissolve them, so that sometimes takes a little time. And the other thing is, some of these come from plant compounds that may be bad for animals that might eat them. So if you've got a pet that likes to chew on something, they might be attracted to some of these, maybe the flavor of the ink or something in them, and some of the compounds might be harmful to them. So you have to be worried about that. The other thing is, I find that when I use these, if I've got a lot of leftovers and I stack it up, I can sometimes get, if I leave them, they sometimes get moldy and they don't reactivate well. They're reasonably priced, but I like to use them by making enough, and I don't like to necessarily store them. So I don't make a big bunch of it and then keep it going for a long time. Instead, I try to make enough for the painting session. But these are an option. One of the other slight downsides to them is that there isn't a big color range in them, but the good thing is they have all the important colors, the most important colors. So that's the pluses and the minuses of all of these. Now let's talk about what colors you should have. I do not, this is coming from somebody that owns this. You would think, oh, you must have a lot of colors in your collection. But that is not true. For beginners, I almost would prefer that they buy a small set, because over and over you're going to use the same colors. Most of these colors are going to not be used. They're going to look pretty, but I keep going back to the, I would say, 10 or 12 colors that are most commonly used. And colors that are mixed are more vibrant than one that's pre-mixed. So which colors should you get and have? Partially it's up to you, but I'm going to give you my basics and why. Okay, let's start with the reds. I like a red that is a kind of a cool red, meaning a red that's got a little bit of blue in it. This kind of a color, maybe like an alizarin crimson, is a good color to have. And then a red that's kind of a hot kind of fire engine red. And those are two good colors to have in even your basic set. And the reason for that is this one, the one that's kind of a hot fire engine red, will mix well with yellows to make bright, vibrant oranges. And this one will mix with the blues nicely to give you a nice purple. So if I use the fire engine one with the blue, it's going to maybe make a kind of a muffled purple, almost a grayish brown. So that's why it's good to have two reds, a cool one and a warm one. When it comes to the yellows, I like a yellow that is very, very bright, warm yellow. And this one's got a little bit of this one's got a little bit of paint from the last painting session on it, but it's a warm yellow color, and it mixes very well with the fire engine red to make a nice bright yellow if I want it. It mixes pretty nicely with the greens and the blues. Because it's a warm yellow, it will give me a nice effect of grass and foliage. The other color that I like is a more of a greenish yellow, oftentimes called lemon yellow, and this one is nice when I want to do maybe a spring color, very clear yellow. Now, the next thing that I really like to have is I like to have two blues. And the two blues that I like to have, one of them is going to be, it's called by a lot of different names. In Chinese, they call it flower blue. In Japanese, it's called bi. And in Western, we call it phthalo blue. And it is a blue that's got a little bit of a green tint in it. When you mix it with that greenish yellow I just told about, you get a very vivid green. If you mix it with a more earth tone, it tones it down quite a bit, but it's a very strong color and will give you a nice dark green. The other color that's really nice to have is I've got to find it here. This color may be a little hard to see in this light, but this is ultramarine blue. Ultramarine blue will mix with your nice bluish red to make a very nice purple. Also, the ultramarine works very nicely with the warm green to make an olive color. So that gives you a nice subtle mix. So those are my six colors that I gotta have off the color wheel. The next thing that I want to have is white. The reason I want to have white is at some point I'm going to be doing a tiger's eye, and I'm just going to want that dot of white to be the glint of the on the eyeball, or maybe I'm on a toned paper and I want to have whiskers or something like that. So white I find very useful. We don't use white very often, but when we do, it's for highlights, and it's a color. Well, it's a pigment that just comes in too handy not to have sometimes. So your next thing that's a must is white. Okay, let's talk about the stone colors for a minute. Stone colors, they are colors that are found in Chinese and Japanese art. In the olden days, before they invented phthalo blue, they used to actually ground malachite and jade and mix it sometimes with a little bit of white, clamshell white, and that made what was called stone green and stone blue. So that was something that was, you'll see paintings out of the Sung Dynasty or old, like the Tokugawa era of Japan with those colors. And so they're kind of popular to have in our painting as well in the modern day, but instead they're now a compound of the phthalo blue or phthalo green and white, but it's pre-mixed, but it's handy to have. It's kind of fun sometimes when you've got a painting of mountains and it's all done in black ink to drop this in, and it makes some really interesting effects. So in my must-have basics, I like to have a stone green and a stone blue. So now I'm up to a grand total of 9 colors. What else might I want to have? Want to have, and that would be a few earth tones. The earth tones, the nice thing about the earth tones is they're very good for, they're inexpensive, they're light fast, and they're very good for landscape and animals that are, there's a lot of animals that aren't that colorful. So it's nice to get at least 2 earth tones, maybe 3. And the earth tones that I recommend would be a color called ochre, but in Japanese it's called odo. So that's a nice color to have. Good yellowish color, but it's not as bright as these bright yellows that you might use for flowers. It's more for like maybe a beach scene or something where you need a yellow color. I find they're sometimes handy for clouds and skies. I also like to have a burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is got some reddish tones to it, but it's a little bit backed off that bright orange color. And my little secret is for castle walls, buildings, and stonework, a little bit of this burnt sienna along with the blue ultramarine makes a really interesting gray. So it's a good thing to have in your palette as well. And let's see, that's the ones that I would say you'd start with. Now, let's talk about a few that are just nice to have sometimes. The nice to have colors are ones that if you do a lot of flower painting, you want bright colors, you might want to also include these. And that would be a bright green, and in Western sets, they might be called yellow-green. In a Japanese set, they're called wakaba. And this color, you can make this color with the ones I've already shown you. But sometimes when you're doing a forest scene or a grassland or something, you really want to put down a lot of green fast. This is a good color to have, potentially. Plus, it's very bright. So if you're doing spring scenes and things like that, it is a pretty good color to get. The other thing is they make a very nice, strong purple. And sometimes I find even the red-blue combination doesn't give me the purpley that I want as much as the very strong purples that they sometimes give you. So if you do a lot of flower painting, you might want to add this to the collection. I'm looking to see which other ones you gotta have. I'll mention the silver, gold, coppers. These are metallic paints. You don't have to get them as a beginner at all. If you want to use them, however, I have found that they don't survive the wet mounting process as well as some of the other paints, because these are basically foil that is cut up and suspended in glue. So when you reactivate the surface of the painting during your wet mounting process, there's a tendency for these to smear. So what I do is I put these gold touches on when the paint is still being dried on the board in the wet mounting process and not before. But if you want to do touches of gold, silver, or bronze, you do have these available. Okay, now my pet peeve or two that I will just warn you about or tell you about. Okay, they do make kind of a sharp greenish color called rokusho. Sometimes it's called phthalo green. And a lot of my beginners find this tube of paint in their set and they go, oh, I'm painting trees, I'm going to use that color. And in fact, that's a mistake, because that color is transparent but very strong, and it doesn't look very realistic. If you're going to use a phthalo green, cut it with some of that ochre color, or if you're trying to do a blackish green, something very dark, add a little bit of the burnt sienna, because that color is very strong, it's very cold, and it's very sharp. And so I always tell people, you got to modulate that one. The other one that's disappointing because it's so pretty, there's a color called this is pigeon wing. This color is in some of these sets, and unfortunately it is fugitive. If you leave this out in the sun for maybe a few weeks, not the painting itself, you're painting, not the paint, it will disappear. It's quite fugitive. There's another color that's called opera that's quite fugitive. So as pretty as this is, only use it for something that you're going to keep mostly stored in the dark. Otherwise, it'll disappear on you. Colors I don't use much. Like I say, that kind of sharp green, the pigeon wing I just told you about. I've never found a use for gray in Sumi-E painting because I can make it, but they are available if people do want them. So that gives you a little bit of an explanation of color theory. I am now going to let you go to explore this. If anyone has any questions for me, please put the questions in the chat box, and I'll try to get back to you with some of that. I do not tie into any particular merchants, and I'm not going to tell you how to contact them in this recording. But if somebody wants to know, I will try to put you in touch with the appropriate dealers at that time. Thank you very much.